Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It's strange how life can change in ways you never expect. One moment, everything feels ordinary and safe, and the next, you find yourself in a situation you never thought you'd be in. That's exactly what happened to me. I never imagined that something as simple as agreeing to share a bed would turn into one of the most complicated and emotional moments of my life. This isn't just another story. It's about choices, boundaries, and the hidden emotions that can surface when you least expect them. I was 23, still figuring out where I belonged in life, still navigating the messy road of relationships and family dynamics. My stepdad, Mark, had been in my life for years. He wasn't just Mom's husband, he had become part of the family in a way that made everyone comfortable. He was kind, responsible, and the type of man people naturally trusted. But sometimes, trust can be tested in the most unexpected ways. That night started out so normal. My mom had to be away for a few days on a work trip, and the house felt unusually quiet. Mark and I had spent the evening watching movies, talking about random things and laughing like we usually did. There was nothing unusual about it, at least not at first. But as the night got later, the air in the house grew colder. The guest room heater wasn't working properly, and the thought of shivering all night in that chilly space made me hesitate. Mark noticed and casually said, "You can sleep in my room if you want. The bed's big enough." It sounded simple, innocent, just an offer of comfort. I agreed. Maybe it was because I didn't want to feel alone in that quiet house, or maybe it was because I trusted him enough to believe it didn't mean anything. But the moment I laid down next to him, something shifted. I could hear his steady breathing, feel the warmth of the blankets, and sense the unspoken tension between us that had never been there before, or maybe I had just never noticed it. I told myself not to think too much of it. It was just two adults sharing a bed for the night. But have you ever been so close to someone that even the smallest movement, the slightest touch, feels magnified? Every breath, every inch of space between us felt like it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. My heart beat faster, and suddenly the silence of the room wasn't comfortable anymore. It was electric. That's when I realized something I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't just about sharing a bed. There were feelings stirring that I didn't know how to handle. Was it loneliness? Curiosity? Or something much deeper I had been ignoring all along? The line between comfort and temptation blurred right there in the dark, and I found myself caught in a moment I couldn't easily step away from. Before I continue, I want to ask you, have you ever been in a situation where your emotions surprised you, where you felt drawn towards something you knew could change everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let me know what you would have done if you were in my place. Because what happened next changed the way I looked at my family, my choices, and myself forever. And it all began with one decision: agreeing to share that bed. That night, lying there in the quiet, I couldn't stop thinking about how strange everything suddenly felt. Mark had always been the steady one in the house, the man who made sure bills were paid, cars were running, and that everyone was safe. He was never overly affectionate, but he had a way of making people feel at ease. Growing up, I respected him because he respected boundaries. That's why sharing that bed with him felt so unusual. It wasn't that anything had happened, it was that something unspoken was hanging in the air, something I couldn't quite name. I tried closing my eyes, willing myself to sleep, but my thoughts wouldn't settle. I kept replaying little moments in my head. Times when Mark had looked at me with a softness I didn't understand. Times when our conversations stretched longer than they needed to, like neither of us wanted them to end. At the time, I brushed it off as harmless connection. But in that bed, it felt different. My heart raced, and I couldn't tell if it was fear, curiosity, or something else entirely. The truth is, we weren't strangers. Mark had been around since I was a teenager, and over the years, we had built a bond that went beyond stepdad and stepdaughter. We were two adults who had shared countless dinners, road trips, and family holidays. He was someone I trusted to give advice, someone who could make me laugh on the hardest days. But lying so close to him in that dark room, I realized trust wasn't the only thing I felt anymore. I turned slightly, careful not to make it obvious, just enough to glimpse his profile in the dim light. He looked peaceful, almost too calm compared to the storm in my chest. And that made me wonder, was I the only one feeling this tension? Or was he lying there too, pretending to sleep, pretending not to notice? The more I thought about it, the heavier the air became. My skin felt warmer under the blankets, my breathing more shallow. It was as if every small detail in that room had been magnified, the ticking of the clock on the wall, the faint creak of the mattress when either of us shifted, the way his hand rested so close to mine without actually touching. Every second felt longer, stretching out in silence. That's when the questions started running through my mind. Why did I agree so quickly to share the bed? Was it really just the broken heater in the guest room? Or was there something inside me that wanted to be there, that wanted to test the boundary we had both silently kept for years? I didn't know the answers, and maybe that's what scared me the most. As the minutes turned into hours, sleep still wouldn't come. My body was restless, my mind even more so. I thought about my mom, about how she trusted us both, about how she would never imagine anything strange about this situation. And yet here I was, awake, battling thoughts I didn't want to admit to myself. The tension between comfort and temptation grew thicker with every passing moment. I tried distracting myself by focusing on memories, like family vacations or dinners where we all laughed together. But even those memories had little cracks in them now, because I couldn't separate the man in those moments from the man lying beside me. I didn't move. I didn't speak. But deep down, I knew something had shifted between us, even if no words had been exchanged. The closeness, the stillness, the silence, it all said more than either of us dared to. And that's where the conflict truly began. Was this just in my head, a passing thought born out of loneliness? Or was there something real happening here, something neither of us could deny? The night stretched on, and with every second, the line between what was safe and what was dangerous blurred even more. I wasn't sure what would happen if either of us crossed it. But one thing was certain, there was no going back to how things were before that night. Would you have trusted yourself to stay in that bed? Or would you have gotten up and walked away before the silence grew too heavy? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see how many of you would have handled it differently. Because that night was only the beginning. The choices we made after would take us down a path we couldn't escape from. The morning after that night felt different in ways I couldn't put into words. Nothing had actually happened, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that everything between us had changed. When I woke up, Mark was already in the kitchen making coffee like he always did, moving around calmly as if nothing unusual had happened. I watched him for a moment, trying to read his face. Was he pretending, or did he really feel nothing at all? He greeted me with the same warm tone as usual, asking if I wanted toast, joking lightly about how late I had slept. On the surface, everything looked normal, but beneath it all, I felt this undercurrent of tension running between us. Every glance, every small gesture carried weight. The way his eyes lingered a little longer than before, the way my words stumbled when I tried to act natural, it was like a secret was growing between us, even though neither of us had spoken about it. As the day went on, I found myself watching him more closely than ever. I noticed things I had ignored before, how he laughed at small things, how patient he was when fixing something around the house, how easy it was for him to carry himself with quiet confidence. These weren't new qualities, but they felt different now. Almost dangerous. Because now I wasn't looking at him as just my stepdad, I was looking at him as a man. That realization was the heart of the conflict. My mind told me one thing, that this was wrong, that there were boundaries that should never be crossed. But my emotions whispered something else, that I was drawn to him, that part of me wanted to lean into the very tension I was afraid of. The days without Mom at home only made it worse. The house felt quieter, the evenings longer. Sometimes Mark and I ate dinner together, and the conversations flowed more easily than they should have. Other times, we sat in silence, both of us pretending to be focused on the TV, though I could feel the energy between us shifting with every passing minute. One night, I caught myself studying the way his hands rested on the arm of the couch, steady and strong, and I had to look away before my thoughts carried me too far. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't just about one night in the same bed. This was about all the small moments that added up, the little pieces of connection that had been building without me even noticing. But there was another angle to this that made it even more complicated. My mom. She trusted me. She trusted him. She had no idea about the silence that lingered between us, the tension neither of us could name. And that thought made me feel guilty, even though nothing had actually happened yet. Was it possible to betray someone without even acting on it? Was it betrayal simply to feel the way I did? I tried distracting myself with work, with friends, with anything that could keep my mind busy. But whenever I came home, it was the same. The same silence, the same glances, the same unspoken pull. And I began to wonder if Mark was going through the same struggle. Was he fighting the same thoughts? Did he sense the same shift, or was I just imagining it all? One evening, he surprised me by asking if I wanted to go for a drive. Just to get out of the house, he said casually. I agreed, maybe too quickly. The night air was cool, the roads quiet, and for the first time, it felt like we were in our own little world, separate from everything else. We talked about simple things, but underneath, it felt like something bigger was building, waiting for the right moment to surface. The more time we spent together, the more the line blurred. I couldn't tell if I was stepping closer to something real or if I was creating a story in my own head. But I knew one thing for sure, the conflict wasn't going away. It was growing, pulling me into a place where I didn't know if I could stop myself. The days kept passing, and with each one, the tension grew heavier. It was like carrying a secret that lived in every corner of the house. I couldn't escape it, not in the kitchen, not in the living room, not even when I tried staying in my own room. Mark was always there, steady and calm, but his silence said more than words ever could. It was the kind of silence that makes you wonder if both of you are thinking the exact same thing, but too afraid to admit it. One night, the storm outside rattled the windows, and the power flickered until the house finally went dark. The air felt charged, not just from the weather, but from the way the room seemed to close in on us. Mark lit a few candles and set them on the table, their soft glow casting shadows across his face. I sat across from him, pretending to sip my tea, but my eyes kept drifting to the way the light caught his features. He looked different in that moment, stronger, older, more mysterious. And I realized just how dangerous this was becoming. We talked in low voices, the storm drowning out everything else. At first, it was about simple things, work, family, little memories from the past. But then the conversation slowed, stretched out, and finally stopped. The silence returned, heavier than ever, and I could feel my pulse in my ears. Every flicker of the candlelight seemed to make the space between us smaller, until it felt like the air itself was pressing us closer together. When another thunderclap shook the house, I startled slightly, and Mark's hand brushed against mine on the table. It was an accident, maybe, but the touch lingered just a second too long. That single moment sent my heart racing, and I pulled my hand back quickly, afraid of what might happen if I didn't. Afterward, neither of us spoke. The storm outside raged on, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside me. I couldn't tell if Mark had meant it, or if it was just me reading too much into everything. But I couldn't forget how it felt. That accidental touch burned in my memory, making it impossible to think about anything else. Later that night, when we finally moved to the bedroom to wait out the storm, the silence between us was unbearable. I laid down, staring at the ceiling, but every sound, his breathing, the shift of the blankets, kept me wide awake. I knew we were one step away from crossing a line that could never be undone. The question was no longer if it would happen, but when. And in that dark room, with the storm howling outside and the tension pressing down on us, I felt the moment coming closer with every passing second. The storm carried on through the night, but it wasn't the thunder that kept me awake, it was the weight of everything left unsaid. I lay there with my eyes wide open, listening to Mark shift slightly in the bed beside me. Every movement was amplified, every breath a reminder of how close we were. I thought the night would end in silence, like all the others, but then something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the tension. It was a message from my mom. She said her work trip might be cut short, and she could be home earlier than expected. My chest tightened. The thought of her walking through the door and finding us like this, even though nothing had happened, sent a rush of panic through me. It wasn't just about being caught. It was about the truth, that there was something dangerous building between us, something she could never know. I set the phone down, trying to steady my breathing, but Mark noticed. He asked quietly, "Everything okay?" His voice was calm, steady, but in that moment, it felt like he was asking more than just about the message. I nodded quickly, but the look in his eyes lingered, like he knew I was holding back. That's when I realized this wasn't one-sided. He felt it too, and that was the second plot twist I hadn't been prepared for. The realization made my pulse quicken. All this time, I had wondered if I was imagining it, if the tension was just my own struggle. But seeing it in his eyes, seeing the hesitation, the same quiet pull, it changed everything. It wasn't just me fighting this. It was him too. The next day, things felt different again. Mark kept more distance than usual, but the silence was heavier than ever. We went about our routines, cooking, cleaning, watching TV, but underneath every word was the awareness that something had shifted. It was like walking on the edge of a cliff, knowing one wrong step could send everything crashing down. And just when I thought I was starting to get control of myself, another surprise made it harder. That evening, one of my close friends, Emily, called and invited me out. She asked if Mark wanted to come too, since they had known each other for years. I froze for a moment, unsure how to answer. The idea of the three of us together felt strange, almost dangerous, like it would expose what neither of us was saying out loud. We ended up going, the three of us sitting at a small restaurant while rain still drizzled outside. Emily laughed and teased Mark the way old friends do, and I found myself watching their interaction more closely than I should have. For the first time, I felt something sharp, jealousy. It startled me because I had no right to feel it. But seeing him smile at her, even in a casual way, made me realize just how far I had already fallen into this complicated mess. That jealousy stayed with me long after we got home. It raised the stakes in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about silence and stolen glances anymore, it was about emotions I couldn't control. Now I wasn't just fighting the pull between us, I was fighting myself. That night, lying awake again, I understood the truth. This wasn't going to fade away. The tension, the emotions, the jealousy, it was all building towards something inevitable. The question wasn't if it would explode, but how and what the cost would be when it did. Have you ever been caught in a situation where feelings grew stronger the more you tried to ignore them? Tell me in the comments how you would handle it. Because from this point on, the choices we made were only going to get more dangerous, and the storm between us was far from over. The night after that dinner with Emily was when everything finally reached its breaking point. The tension that had been building for days could no longer be ignored. When we got home, the house felt heavier than ever. Mark tried to keep himself busy, stacking dishes, wiping counters that didn't need wiping, anything to avoid being in the same room with me too long. I sat on the couch, staring at the flickering TV screen, but I couldn't focus on anything. The silence between us was louder than the storm that had passed. Eventually, he joined me, sitting at the far end of the couch. For a few minutes we didn't say a word, but then he looked at me in a way that said everything we had been holding back. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was the quiet admission that he had been fighting the same battle all along. "I can't keep pretending none of this is happening," he finally said, his voice low and steady. My breath caught in my chest. Hearing him say it out loud made my heart race, because it confirmed what I had both wanted and feared. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was so thick it felt impossible to breathe. I wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just looked at him, waiting for him to say more. He leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped together, as though he was holding himself back with every ounce of restraint. Then, with a heavy sigh, he admitted the truth, that he had felt the same pull, the same confusion, and that he didn't know how much longer he could fight it. That was the climax, the moment when everything we had hidden was laid bare. My heart pounded, my hands trembled, but underneath it all was a strange sense of relief. We weren't imagining this. It was real. And yet, it was also the most dangerous truth we could face. Just when I thought the moment might tip over the edge, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a call from my mom. She said she was already on her way home, hours earlier than planned. The sound of her voice was like ice water poured over the fire that had been building between us. The reality hit hard. Whatever we were about to do, whatever we might have confessed, had been stopped in its tracks. The twist was that fate intervened at the exact moment we were about to lose control. And maybe that was the only reason nothing more happened that night. So here's what I want to know. Was that fate saving us, or was it just delaying the inevitable? Tell me in the comments what you think. Because even though the climax came with truth, the story didn't end there. Some choices stay with you long after the moment has passed. When my mom called that night, saying she was already on her way home, it was like the air shifted in an instant. The tension that had been pressing down on us vanished, replaced by a sharp sense of reality. Mark and I sat in silence, both of us frozen, knowing exactly how close we had come to crossing a line we could never uncross. The sound of her voice through the phone had been enough to remind us of everything at stake. By the time she walked through the door, suitcase in hand and a tired smile on her face, we had already retreated into our familiar roles. I hugged her, asked about her trip, helped her unpack little things, and watched Mark go back to being the calm, steady partner she trusted completely. No one would have guessed what had been building in her absence, and maybe that was for the best. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house slowly shifted back to normal. The quiet tension lingered between me and Mark, but we both avoided being alone together for too long. It wasn't awkward, it was careful. We had admitted the truth in the heat of the moment, but we also knew what it meant. Acting on it would have destroyed everything: the family, the trust, and the life we had built together. The resolution wasn't about giving in to what we felt, it was about recognizing it and choosing not to let it control us. That was the hardest part. Every so often, our eyes would meet, and I'd see a flicker of what had almost happened, but we both looked away, silently agreeing that some things had to stay unspoken. Looking back, I realized the whole experience taught me something important. Attraction, temptation, desire, they're powerful, but they don't have to define us. Sometimes the bravest choice is to walk away, even when every part of you wants to step forward. That stormy night had tested both of us, and though we came close, fate gave us the chance to stop. Now, when I think about that time, I don't see it as just a story about tension or temptation. I see it as a lesson in boundaries, in choices, and in what it means to protect the people you love, even from yourself. Maybe it wasn't the ending some might expect, but it was the ending that kept our family whole. So I'll leave you with this. Have you ever faced a moment where your heart wanted one thing, but your mind knew better? Share your thoughts in the comments. And let me know if you'd like to hear a sequel, because sometimes endings are just beginnings in disguise. Summary: this story follows a young woman who agrees to share a bed with her stepdad while her mom is away. What begins as innocent comfort slowly grows into a web of tension, temptation, and emotional conflict. With storms, silence, and unspoken feelings building up, the two must face the truth of their emotions without destroying the trust of the family. Just as they come close to giving in, an unexpected twist stops them, forcing them to make the hardest choice: walking away to protect what matters most. 5.